My roommate and supposed best friend smirked after stealing the final interview for my dream job, saying, "May the best woman win." She didn't know the company's mandatory background check would unearth the one secret her mother paid a fortune to bury, a secret I've kept for years. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The words hung in the air of our small, shared living room, sharp and glittering as shattered glass. I got the final interview. I looked up from my laptop, my own meticulously crafted cover letter still glowing on the screen. For a moment, my brain refused to process the sentence. It was as if Jenna had spoken in a foreign language. "The final interview for what?" I asked, even though a cold, heavy dread was already starting to pool in my stomach. Jenna leaned against the doorframe, a picture of casual triumph. She was wearing my favorite oversized sweater, the one she'd borrowed last week, and holding a mug of tea. Everything about the scene was normal, domestic, and utterly wrong. Her smile was the worst part, a tight, polished thing that didn't reach her eyes. "For the brand strategist position at Sterling Cross," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I know, it's crazy, right? I just threw my hat in the ring for fun. I never thought I'd actually get this far." The air rushed out of my lungs. Sterling Cross, the brand strategist position, my dream job, not just a dream job, but the dream job. The one I had spent the last 12 months of my life preparing for. The one I had talked about endlessly, researched obsessively, and tailored my entire professional existence around. The job Jenna had listened to me dream about, night after night, offering supportive nods and encouraging words. I felt a wave of dizziness, the kind that comes with a sudden shock. My hands, resting on the keyboard, started to tremble. On my screen was the culmination of a year's worth of work: portfolio links, performance metrics from my current job, a personalized introduction video I'd spent 3 weekends perfecting. All for Sterling Cross. You applied for the Sterling Cross job." I stammered, my voice a faint echo of its usual self. "Well, yeah," she said with a little shrug, taking a delicate sip of her tea. "You made it sound so amazing, I figured, why not give it a shot? It's a free market, Amy." A free market. She said it so easily, as if we were discussing the price of avocados, not the calculated demolition of my trust. For a full year, she had sat beside me on this very couch, looking over my resume drafts. She de-drilled me with potential interview questions she'd found online. She said, "You're a shoo-in, Ames, nobody is more prepared than you." It had all been a lie, every supportive word, every encouraging smile. It was a reconnaissance mission. She wasn't building me up. She was studying my strategy to replicate it. My mind raced, replaying conversations, searching for clues I had missed. The way she'd casually ask about the specific department head I was trying to network with. Her helpful suggestion that I focus on my digital analytics experience, which I later saw she had padded heavily on her own updated resume. She hadn't been my cheerleader, she had been my spy. She must have seen the dawning horror on my face, because her expression hardened, the thin veneer of sympathy cracking to reveal the raw, unapologetic ambition beneath. She pushed off the doorframe and walked over to the small dining table, setting her mug down with a decisive click. "Look, Amy, I didn't want you to find out this way," she said, though her tone suggested she absolutely did. "My final interview is tomorrow morning. Yours was last week, right? So we'll see what happens." She looked at me then, a direct, challenging stare. "May the best woman win." The condescension in her voice was a physical blow. It was the phrase of a rival, not a friend. It was a declaration of war from a battle I didn't even know I was fighting. I felt a profound sense of foolishness, of naivety so deep it was humiliating. I had handed my playbook to the enemy, and she was now using it to score the winning touchdown. I couldn't find any words. My throat was tight with a mixture of rage and grief, so I just nodded, a jerky, mechanical motion. I wished her luck, my voice barely a whisper. I told her I hoped her interview went well. It was all I could manage, a pathetic shield of politeness against the devastating shrapnel of her betrayal. She seemed satisfied with my surrender, giving me one last pitying look before breezing off to her room to get her beauty sleep. I was left alone in the sudden, crushing silence of the living room, the glow of my laptop screen a mocking reminder of my now pointless efforts. I stared at my own hopeful face in the introduction video, a ghost from a different lifetime, one that existed 20 minutes ago. But as the initial shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, quiet anger, a memory surfaced. It was a distant, murky thing at first, a scene from our college days that I had intentionally packed away in the deepest corner of my mind. It was a memory of another time Jenna had been caught, another time she'd faced consequences, and the extraordinary lengths her mother had gone to make it all disappear. The betrayal was worse than losing the job. It was the realization that our entire friendship had been built on a foundation of lies, both hers and mine. The night was interminable. I lay in my bed, staring at the familiar patterns the streetlights cast on my ceiling, but seeing only Jenna's triumphant, pitying face. Every creak of the old apartment building, every distant siren, seemed to amplify the roaring silence in my own head. Sleep was a distant country I had no visa for. My heart hammered against my ribs with a frantic, painful rhythm, a physical manifestation of the betrayal I felt. This wasn't just a friend going after the same job. This was a calculated act of deception, a year-long con that had left me feeling hollowed out and utterly stupid. When the sun finally began to bleed through my blinds, I felt no relief, only a profound sense of exhaustion. I heard Jenna's alarm, followed by the sounds of her getting ready, the shower running, the click of her makeup drawers, the confident, purposeful footsteps on the hardwood floor. It was the sound of my dream being prepared for by someone else. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to disappear, to melt into the mattress and reemerge in a world where yesterday hadn't happened. Eventually, I forced myself to get up. I couldn't hide in my room forever. I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water, my movements slow and heavy, as if I were wading through mud. Jenna was standing by the counter, dressed in a sleek, dark gray pantsuit that looked suspiciously like the one I had bookmarked online weeks ago. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, professional bun, and her face was a mask of serene confidence. "Morning," she chirped, not looking at me as she dropped a tea bag into a travel mug. "Big day." "Good luck," I mumbled, turning my back to her to fill my glass at the sink. The words tasted like ash. "Thanks, I feel really good about it," she said. There was a pause, and then she added, "You know, I'm sorry if it was a shock, Amy, but I saw an opportunity and I took it. That's how the world works. You have to look out for number one." I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles turning white. Look out for number one. Had she been looking out for number one when I stayed up all night helping her cram for a final exam she'd forgotten about? Or when I'd lent her money for rent last year, no questions asked, even though it meant I had to live on ramen for a month? Our friendship, it seemed, had been a one-way street, and I had been blind to all the signs. I didn't turn around, I couldn't look at her. "I get it, Jenna," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Good, I'm glad you're not going to be weird about this." She snapped the lid onto her travel mug. "Well, wish me luck." She breezed past me, a cloud of expensive perfume in her wake, and a moment later, the front door clicked shut. The apartment was finally quiet. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass of the kitchen window, looking down at the street 4 floors below. I watched as Jenna emerged from our building, hailing a cab with a flick of her wrist, the picture of a woman about to conquer the world. My world. A cold, hard knot formed in my chest. It wasn't just sadness anymore, it was something else, something sharper. It was the steely feeling of resolve. She thought she had one. She thought her ambition and her ruthlessness were all she needed. She was so focused on my playbook that she'd forgotten her own history. She had taken my research, my contacts, my strategies, but she had forgotten one crucial detail, a detail her mother had paid a fortune to bury. A detail I had never, ever forgotten. I had been a victim of her betrayal, but I refused to be its casualty. Our friendship began, as many do, in the chaotic trenches of a freshman dorm. We were both outsiders, me, a scholarship kid from a small town, overwhelmed by the big city. Her, the daughter of wealthy, aloof parents starved for genuine connection. We bonded over late-night study sessions, cheap pizza, and a shared dream of making a name for ourselves in the cutthroat world of marketing. For years, I believed that bond was real. I saw her as the sister I never had. I was the planner, the methodical one. I spent my college years working part-time jobs and internships, building my resume piece by piece. Jenna was the charismatic one, effortlessly charming and possessed of a style grace that made people gravitate toward her. She always seemed to get by on that charm, doing just enough to pass her classes while spending most of her energy cultivating a vibrant social life. I admired her for it, in a way. She made life look so easy. After graduation, when we decided to get an apartment together, it felt like a natural extension of our college sisterhood. I landed a stable, if unglamorous, position as a junior marketing coordinator. Jenna bounced between freelance gigs and short-term contracts, never quite finding her footing. I saw her struggles as temporary hurdles, and I did everything I could to help. I proofread her applications, connected her with people from my network, and was her biggest cheerleader. About a year ago, I discovered the opening at Sterling Cross. It wasn't just a job, it was a calling. They were the most innovative marketing firm in the country, known for their high-profile luxury clients and their commitment to bold, narrative-driven campaigns. The brand strategist role was everything I'd ever worked toward. From that day on, it became my singular focus. I bought a large 3-ring binder, a physical manifestation of my ambition, which I jokingly called my Sterling Cross Bible. It contained everything: my research on the company's history, printouts of their most successful campaigns, detailed biographies of their executive team, including the man I hoped would be my future boss, Mr. Sterling himself. I practiced my interview skills, took online courses in advanced analytics to plug the gaps in my resume, and spent weekends perfecting my portfolio. And I shared every single bit of it with Jenna. She would sit with me at our small dining table, feigning interest as I gushed about a new piece of information I'd uncovered. "Oh, that's fascinating," she'd say, her eyes scanning a page from my binder. "You should definitely mention that in your interview." She'd listen as I rehearsed my answers to potential questions, offering suggestions that, in retrospect, were designed to extract more information. "What's your strategy for the case study portion?" she'd ask. "How are you planning to frame your 5-year plan?" I, in my blind trust, held nothing back. I saw our sessions as a partnership, a friend helping a friend achieve her dream. I never imagined she was absorbing it all, cataloging my every move, and plotting to use it for herself. The primary antagonist in my life wasn't just Jenna, it was the world she came from. Her mother, Mrs. Prescott, was a formidable woman, sculpted by wealth and social standing. She was tall, rail-thin, and always impeccably dressed, with a smile that was as perfectly constructed and empty as a department store mannequin's. I only met her a handful of times during college, but she made it clear that she saw me as a temporary and slightly inconvenient fixture in her daughter's life. To Mrs. Prescott, everything was about appearances. A daughter at a top university was a status symbol. A daughter with friends from the right families was a bonus. A daughter with a scholarship-funded roommate was a minor social misstep, to be tolerated. Jenna inherited her mother's obsession with image, but without the old money confidence to back it up. Her charm was a shield for a deep-seated insecurity. She needed constant validation, and she measured her self-worth by external markers of success: the right clothes, the right friends, and now, the right job, my dream job. She didn't want the brand strategist position because she was passionate about narrative marketing. She wanted it because it was prestigious. She wanted it because I wanted it so badly, and stealing it from me would be the ultimate validation of her own superiority. She didn't just want to win, she needed to see me lose. The day of Jenna's interview passed in a blur of forced productivity. I went to my office, sat at my desk, and stared at spreadsheets, the numbers swimming before my eyes. I answered emails with a robotic efficiency, my mind a million miles away. The shock had finally subsided, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. The grief over my lost friendship was still there, but it was now overshadowed by a quiet, simmering anger. I had been played and I had been a fool, but I was not powerless. That evening, I didn't go straight home. I walked to a small, quiet park a few blocks from my office and sat on a bench, watching the city lights begin to twinkle against the bruised purple sky. I needed to think, to step away from the suffocating atmosphere of the apartment I shared with my saboteur. My investigation wasn't about digging up new dirt on Jenna. I didn't need to. The dirt was old, buried, and paid for. Instead, I let my mind travel back 8 years, to a cold, drizzly Tuesday in my sophomore year of college. I had been walking back to the dorm from a late class when I saw it. Through the large front window of a trendy, expensive boutique just off Ka. Plus, I saw Jenna. She was slipping a delicate silver necklace into the pocket of her coat, her movements quick and furtive. My heart had stopped. A moment later, a store employee confronted her. There was a quiet, tense exchange, and then Jenna was being led towards a back office. I was the only other person who saw the whole thing unfold. I ran back to the dorm, my mind reeling. An hour later, campus security was at our door. They wanted to know if Jenna had any history of this, if I had ever seen her with items she couldn't afford. Panicked and not wanting to be a snitch, I played dumb. I said Jenna was a good person, that it had to be a misunderstanding. The next morning, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Mrs. Prescott. Her voice was ice. She didn't ask, she informed. She told me she was handling the unfortunate situation with the boutique. The store had agreed not to press charges if the item was returned, and a generous donation was made. However, there was a record of the incident with campus security, a black mark that could affect Jenna's academic standing. "My daughter says you were there," Mrs. Prescott said, her voice sharp and accusatory. "She says you saw what happened." I started, unsure what to say. "Listen to me very carefully," she cut in. "Jenna made a silly, childish mistake. It cannot be allowed to ruin her future. I understand your financial situation is precarious. Your scholarship only covers so much." She then made her offer, a transaction disguised as generosity. She would pay my entire final year's tuition. In exchange, I would forget everything I saw. If anyone from the university asked again, I would state that I saw nothing, that I was mistaken about what I thought I saw. I was to be a blind spot in Jenna's history. I was 19, terrified, and constantly worried about money. The offer was a lifeline I couldn't refuse. I agreed. I took the money, kept my mouth shut, and watched as the incident was scrubbed from Jenna's campus life. Jenna herself never spoke of it to me. We went on as if it never happened, but the secret sat between us, a silent, unacknowledged debt. Jenna believed it was buried. But I knew that while her mother's money could make campus security look the other way, it couldn't erase a police report, however minor. A misdemeanor charge had been filed, a permanent stain on her record. Sitting there on the park bench, the memory was as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. I finally understood the true nature of Mrs. Prescott's payment. It wasn't just hush money, it was a chain tethering me to their family's secret. My turning point came with a single, clear thought. My integrity was not for sale, even if my silence once was. Jenna's betrayal had, in a strange way, freed me from that old, tainted bargain. I pulled out my phone. My fingers flew across the screen. I did not call the police. I did not look up lawyers. I did something far more strategic. I navigated to the Sterling Cross Careers page, to the section on their corporate philosophy. There it was, in bold letters, the Sterling Standard of Integrity. The page detailed their commitment to ethics, transparency, and character. It explicitly stated that all final candidates for management-level positions were subject to a comprehensive background check conducted by a third-party security firm. No exceptions. Jenna, in her arrogance and haste to copy my playbook, had clearly skipped the chapter on corporate policy. She had focused on the what of the job, but never the who of the company. I took a deep breath and opened my email. I composed a short, professional message to Mr. Sterling, the senior hiring manager who had interviewed me the previous week. Subject, thank you Amy last name, brand strategist interview. Dear Mr. Sterling, I am writing to express my sincere gratitude for the opportunity to interview for the brand strategist position last week. I truly enjoyed our conversation and came away even more impressed with Sterling Cross's innovative culture and its profound commitment to integrity. I remain incredibly enthusiastic about this role and confident that my skills and dedication align perfectly with the values that make your company a leader in the industry. Thank you again for your time and consideration. Sincerely, Amy last name. It was simple, it was professional. It didn't mention Jenna or any wrongdoing, but it strategically placed the word integrity at the forefront, reminding him of my alignment with their core values. It was a quiet move on the chessboard, a subtle reinforcement of my own character in the face of my rival's impending doom. I hit send, a sense of calm washing over me for the first time in 24 hours. The trap was not mine to spring. I just had to wait patiently for Jenna to walk into it herself. Jenna came home that evening walking on air. The front door flew open, and she practically danced NTO the living room, her face flushed with excitement. She tossed her expensive handbag onto the sofa and spun around in a little circle. I nailed it, she announced to the empty room before spotting me sitting at the dining table, pretending to read a book. Amy, oh my God, I nailed it. Mr. Sterling loved me. We just clicked. He said my ideas for the case study were some of the most innovative he's ever seen. I looked up, my expression carefully neutral. My ideas, she was praising my ideas. That's great, Jenna, I said, my voice even. Congratulations. He basically offered me the job on the spot, she continued, completely oblivious to my cold demeanor. She was high on her success, too high to notice anything else. He said it was just a formality, but they have to run the standard checks, and then HR would be in touch with the official offer by the end of the week. I'm going to be a brand strategist at Sterling Cross. She plopped down on the chair opposite me, her eyes shining. We should celebrate. Let's go out, get a bottle of something expensive. My treat. This was it, the moment I had been steeling myself for. My heart was pounding, but my voice, when I spoke, was calm and measured. I leaned forward slightly, as if sharing a confidence. Weren't you nervous about the final screening process? I was reading up on it after my interview. It sounded incredibly thorough. Jenna waved a dismissive hand, the gesture a perfect imitation of her mother S. Oh, it's just standard procedure. A credit check, confirming my employment history, that kind of boring HR stuff. It's nothing. I thought I read something about a full background check too, I pressed gently, my eyes locked on hers. Like a deep dive. They call it the Sterling Standard of Integrity, right? For the first time, a flicker of something, annoyance, uncertainty, crossed her face. She frowned. I don't know, I guess. Why are you so fixated on that? It's not like I have anything to hide. The lie was so bald, so reflexive, that I almost laughed. Nothing to hide. A woman whose mother had paid the equivalent of a new car to hide a criminal charge from a university disciplinary board had nothing to hide from one of the most rigorous corporate screening processes in the country. Her arrogance was a shield, but I could see the tiny cracks beginning to form. No reason, I said, leaning back and giving her a small, tight smile. I was just curious. It's a big deal, that job. They must want to be sure they're hiring the right kind of person. Her eyes narrowed. The triumphant glow was gone, replaced by suspicion. What's that supposed to mean? It means exactly what I said, I replied, my voice still light. They want someone who embodies their values, someone with integrity. I let the word hang in the air between us. Integrity, the same word I had used in my email to Mr. Sterling. It was a quiet, pointed dart, and I could see from her expression that it had hit its mark. The confidence in her posture deflated just a little. She had been so focused on beating me, on proving she was smarter and more cunning, that she had never once stopped to consider her own past. She had seen the job as a prize to be won through deception, not a position to be earned through merit. Well, I'm not worried, she said, her voice a little too sharp, a little too defensive. She stood up abruptly. Anyway, I'm going to have a long bath, I've earned it. She turned and walked toward her room, her stride not quite as buoyant as it had been moments before. She hadn't admitted anything, hadn't revealed her secret, but I didn't need her to. I had seen it in her eyes. The first shadow of doubt, the first cold prickle of fear. The trap was perfectly set and the bait, her own arrogance, had been taken. Now, all I had to do was wait for the jaws to snap shut. The next few days were a masterclass in psychological warfare, with Jenna's mood swinging wildly between euphoric confidence and anxious paranoia. One moment, she would be browse online for apartments in a more affluent neighborhood, talking about the signing bonus she was sure to receive. The next, I would find her sitting silently in the living room, staring at her phone, a deep frown creasing her brow. She started asking me pointed questions, trying to probe the edges of my knowledge. So, when you say background check, what do you think that actually entails? She asked casually one evening while pretending to be absorbed in a television show. I don't know for sure, I'd reply truthfully, not looking up from my laptop. I just know the company prides itself on being thorough. Another time, she tried a different angle. It's kind of weird that they dig into your past like that, don't you think? I mean, everyone does stupid things in college. It shouldn't count. I guess it depends on what you do, I said simply, and whether you're honest about it. Each of my calm, simple answers see. Imed to feed her growing anxiety. She was living on a knife's edge, caught between the thrill of her supposed victory and the terrifying possibility of it all being taken away. Meanwhile, I built a fortress of calm around myself. I went to work, I met friends for dinner, I deep-cleaned my half of the apartment. I was disentangling my life from hers, piece by piece. My case wasn't something I was building with evidence. It was a moral case I was building in my own mind. I had to be certain that my inaction was not, in itself, an act of revenge. I wrestled with it at night. Was I a bad person for letting this happen, for keeping a secret that was now poised to ruin her? My mind kept drifting back to that day in the university dean's office, a week after Mrs. Prescott had called me. I had been summoned there, my heart pounding with fear. The dean, a kind but firm woman, had asked me directly about the incident at the boutique. And I, remembering Mrs. Prescott's icy voice and the promise of a paid-for education, had lied. I said I hadn't seen anything clearly. I said it was probably a misunderstanding. I had felt sick to my stomach, the weight of the lie a physical burden. Then, my thoughts shifted to the day Mrs. Prescott had met me at a discreet cafe off campus to give me the check. It wasn't a bank transfer. It was a physical check from her personal account, a tangible piece of our sordid transaction. She'd slid it across the table in a plain white envelope. "This should cover everything," she'd said, her eyes cold and assessing. She wasn't thanking me, she was finalizing a purchase, the purchase of my silence. As I reached for the envelope, she'd placed her hand over mine, her manicured nails pressing lightly into my skin. "A word of advice, Amy," she'd whispered, leaning in. "This conversation, this payment, this entire unfortunate episode, it never happened. It is for the best, for Jenna's future, and for yours." It wasn't advice, it was a threat. A polite, veiled threat from a woman who knew how to use her power and money to make problems disappear. For years, I had carried the shame of that transaction. I had justified it as a necessary evil, the only way a poor student like me could survive, but Jenna's betrayal had cauterized that wound. The debt was canceled. The threat was empty. Mrs. Prescott hadn't bought my loyalty, she had only rented my silence. And the lease was up. By Friday, the tension in the apartment was thick enough to choke on. Jenna was a ghost, flitting from room to room, constantly checking her email, jumping every time her phone buzzed. The call from HR with the official offer hadn't come. Her triumphant glow had been completely extinguished, replaced by the pale, haggard look of pure dread. She knew. She didn't know how I knew, but she knew that her past was catching up with her. The silence from Sterling Cross was the sound of her future crumbling. The end came not with a bang, but with the soft, almost imperceptible click of an email arriving in an inbox. It was Friday evening. I was in my room, packing a weekend bag to go stay with a friend from work. I could no longer stand the suffocating atmosphere of the apartment. Suddenly, I heard a sound from the living room. It was a sharp, strangled gasp, followed by a clatter, as if a phone had been dropped on the floor. I hesitated for a moment, then walked out of my room. Jenna was standing in the middle of the living room, her body rigid. Her phone lay face down on the hardwood floor. Her face was ashen, her eyes wide with a horrified disbelief that was quickly curdling into rage. She looked up and saw me, and her expression twisted into a mask of pure venom. "You," she hissed, her voice trembling, "you did this." "Did what, Jenna?" I asked calmly, crossing my arms. I knew exactly what had happened. The email had arrived. The offer had been rescinded. "You called them," she shrieked, taking a step toward me. "You told them. You couldn't stand that I beat you, so you dug up some stupid, ancient history and you ruined everything for me." I stood my ground, my newfound resolve a solid wall against her fury. "I didn't call anyone, Jenna. I haven't spoken to anyone at Sterling Cross since my interview." "Liar," she screamed, her voice cracking. Her carefully constructed facade of sophistication had shattered, revealing the desperate, entitled person underneath. "How else would they know? No one knows about that. It was supposed to be gone." "It was never gone," I said, my voice quiet but firm, cutting through her hysteria. "Your mother's money could make the university look the other way, but it couldn't erase a police report. Sterling Cross doesn't rely on hearsay, Jenna. They do their homework. It's a mandatory, non-negotiable background check for all finalists. It's in their corporate policy. You would have known that if you'd done your own research instead of just stealing mine." The color drained from her face. The accusation of sabotage was her only defense, and I had just dismantled it with simple, undeniable facts. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. She was beginning to understand that her enemy wasn't me. It was her own past, her own arrogance. "But how?" she finally stammered. "It was a minor charge, a misdemeanor. It happened years ago." "It was a charge of theft, Jenna," I said, the final pieces clicking into place for her. "And you failed to disclose it on your application. For a company that calls its guiding principle the sterling standard of integrity, that's a fatal error. They didn't fire you for what you did when you were 18. They rejected you for who you are now, someone who lies." Her rage finally collapsed, replaced by a wave of desperate, pleading denial. "You could have warned me," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "If you were really my friend, you would have told me this could happen." A bitter, humorless laugh escaped my lips. "Your friend? When did you ever treat me like a friend? Was it when you were lying to my face for a year, pretending to support me while you stole my work? Or was it last week when you gloated about getting the interview and told me, 'May the best woman win'? You didn't want a friend, Jenna. You wanted a stepping stone." The tears were flowing freely now, tracking mascara down her pale cheeks. "My life is over," she sobbed. "My career is ruined." "No, it's not," I said, the last vestiges of pity I had for her evaporating. "But you finally have to face a consequence, maybe for the first time in your life." I took a deep breath, ready to finally voice the secret I had carried for 8 long years. "You know what the real irony is, Jenna? You stand there and accuse me of ruining your life, but you seem to have forgotten something. You seem to have forgotten the price of my silence." She looked up, her expression confused. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about my senior year of college," I said, my voice dropping, each word delivered with cold precision. "I'm talking about your mother, Mrs. Prescott, meeting me in a cafe and sliding a check across the table. A check that paid my tuition. A check that bought my silence about your little shoplifting problem. You think I sabotaged you? No, I just stopped upholding my end of a bargain I should never have made. The secret didn't come from me. It came from you. Your mother just paid to make me a part of it." Jenna stared at me, her face a canvas of pure horror. The final defense, the last shred of victimhood she was clinging to, had been utterly destroyed. She wasn't the victim of a jealous friend's sabotage. She was the architect of her own downfall, a downfall that had been set in motion years ago and paid for with her mother's money. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by her ragged, sobbing breaths. She had lost, and she had no one to blame but herself. The aftermath was as quiet and bleak as a battlefield after the fighting has stopped. Jenna didn't scream or argue anymore. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by a hollow, vacant look. She retreated to her room and closed the door. Over the weekend, while I stayed at my friend's place, she packed her things. When I returned on Sunday evening, her room was empty, stripped bare of any sign she had ever lived there. The only thing left was a single key on her nightstand and an indentation in the carpet where her bed used to be. She was gone. She didn't leave a note. The following Monday, my phone rang. The caller ID read Sterling Cross. My heart gave a nervous flutter, a residual reflex from the long, stressful week. I took a breath and answered. "Amy, it's David Sterling." His voice was warm and professional. "Mr. Sterling, hello," I said, trying to keep my own voice steady. "I'm calling with some good news," he said. "We were incredibly impressed with your interview last week, and your portfolio is outstanding. We believe your strategic mindset and your clear commitment to professional integrity would make you a perfect fit for our team. We would like to formally offer you the position of brand strategist." Relief washed over me in a powerful, cleansing wave. It was so overwhelming I had to sit down. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much. I am thrilled to accept." "Excellent," he said. "Now, I must be frank. We did have another promising candidate we were considering. Unfortunately, during our standard due diligence process, some information came to light that showed a fundamental misalignment with our company's core values. It was a disappointing outcome, but it reaffirmed for us the importance of character in our hiring decisions." He didn't need to say her name. His vague, professional explanation was all the validation I needed. I hadn't won by default, I had won on merit. I had won because my character, the very thing Jenna had tried to dismiss as unimportant, was the final, decisive factor. "I understand," I said, "and I appreciate the company's commitment to those values." "We're glad to hear it," he replied. "Welcome aboard, Amy. We're excited to have you." The first few months at Sterling Cross were a whirlwind. The work was every bit as challenging and rewarding as I had dreamed. I was surrounded by brilliant, passionate people, and for the first time in my professional life, I felt like I truly belonged. My past as a junior coordinator at a no-name firm felt like a distant memory from another life. Here, my ideas were valued, my dedication was recognized, and my future felt limitless. I never heard from Jenna directly. I heard whispers through mutual acquaintances that she had moved back home with her parents, her career ambitions indefinitely on hold. I imagined Mrs. Prescott was not pleased. Her investment in covering up one scandal had inadvertently led to a much larger, more public failure. There was no check that could fix this. One afternoon, a few months into my new job, I was looking out the large window of my office, a corner space with a stunning view of the city skyline. It was the kind of office I used to have on my vision board, the one Jenna had once scoffed at as being hopelessly optimistic. I thought about her then, not with anger or bitterness, but with a quiet, detached sadness. I was sad for the friendship I thought we'd had, and for the person she could have been if she hadn't been so consumed by insecurity and envy. Her betrayal had been a painful, devastating blow, but in the end, it had been a strange and unexpected gift. It had severed a toxic tie I didn't even know was strangling me. It had freed me from a shameful secret that wasn't mine to keep, and it had pushed me to find a strength I never knew I possessed. Jenna had wanted to win by any means necessary, but she had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the game. She thought it was about who was the most cunning, when it was always about who was the most capable and the most true. I had wished her luck, and in the end, the universe had delivered exactly what we both deserved. She had her secrets and her empty room. I had my integrity and a view of the entire city.